Why don't you start off by kind of walking us through what this year has looked like as far as your 2024 results? Let's break that down. And then we'll talk about like the journey to get there. Is that fair?
That's fair. Yeah. I think it's been a great year so far. I just broke 30 million this month, in November. And then October was the best month I ever had. I did about 8 million in October. And then I'm set to close the year with 32 sales.
32 sales, so over 30 million, and literally since the Great Recession in 2008. So the whole audience wants to know, how in the world have you been able to do that? So what we're going to do, Mark, is we'll kind of break down what that looks like, what you're doing from a lead generation standpoint, what your conversion looks like. We'll break down the tactics, strategies, techniques that you use. And then what we'll do for everybody that's in the live audience, we'll have an opportunity to do some live Q&A with Mark. And so we'll have about 10 or 15 minutes to do that at the very end. All right. And so why don't we do this? So last year you said you did about 250 in GCI. Is that right?
Yep.
Got it. Now you obviously have a huge team of agents that are doing this 30 million. I mean, it can't just be you alone. You probably have 10, 20 agents on your team?
No, it's just my brother. He tried building out a team, but burned the boats. So
Yeah.
kind of like what you had mentioned last time, but no, it's just me technically as an agent. I'm a solo agent, I consider, but I still have to report to somebody.
Yeah. And that was kind of like a facetious joke, right? A lot of people, when they hear a solo agent, Mark, obviously I know you're solo. A lot of agents will hear that you're doing $30 million in sales volume and think, wow, he must have 10, 20 agents on the team. No, you're doing this all by yourself. So let's just rewind for a second. Because this has been your biggest year, obviously you've made some mistakes along the way. And so, like, what were some of the things early on that maybe got in the way? Like, what do you think was keeping you from doing 30 million for the last couple of years, when arguably it was a better opportunity? It was a better housing market in the last couple of years than it was this year, yet you've done so well this year. So what were the roadblocks before? And by the way, I'm not sure if this is for you or not. You can decide. But if you're a real estate agent, you're watching this video and you're not earning at least $100,000 per year, you feel like you're overworked, you're underpaid, maybe even underappreciated, perhaps it's time to talk. If you're serious about growing your real estate sales business and you're open to having a conversation to determine if working with me as your coach makes sense or not, then click the link in the description beneath this video or simply go to reverseselling.com to book a call.
The biggest thing for me, and people who maybe don't join the program or do know of Vulcan 7 or know of something that can benefit their time per dial, I was self-dialing for the last 3 years. So I would go on the MLS, I'd hand pick, I'd hand search your contact info. I'd spend 8 minutes trying to find one contact. I'd make 20, 30 calls a day, and that managed to get me to 19 to 20 million. But it didn't do what it did for me in the last. And I discovered Vulcan 4 months ago. That's when I joined. So that in the last 4 months, I've done about 14 million. So I was set not to reach my 2023 stats that I hit, and I thought I was going to double it. Let alone the last 4 months, I doubled it.
Yeah. Well, it can't be just Vulcan 7. It can't be you got a dialer now all of a sudden everything's like hunky dory. Because if that was the case, man, oh man, that would be pretty easy for people. Because let me just ask you this. Maybe it's a better question. When you come to client acquisition, you've made a decision that you have to go out there and initiate conversation. Was it always that way? Or do you believe in this idea that agents can passively approach lead generation and maybe post some content on the internet, do a little bit of social media, do a couple open houses there, and do that type of production? In other words, you at some point said you have to go play offense and prospect. How did you make that decision versus doing what most agents do, which is take a passive approach and wait for business to find them?
Yeah, I think I got into it young, and I never wanted to have someone hand me an opportunity to serve like a family member or a cousin. So I made myself a promise, and I said the first client I'll close is going to be off my own efforts. But also that is, I printed something that I just found online from a mentor, and he called it the Greatness Tracker, and it's 75 conversations a week. I've been doing that for 4 years.
Love it. I love it.
I do 2 of them a week, 3 of them a week, try to have as many as I can, but it was a minimum of 1.
Yeah. And so we're going to kind of break down that business quickly. We don't have to go too deep on this. I do want your opinion, why you think that 80 to 90% of our industry has such a difficult time accepting the fact that they have to go out there and call people. They have to go out there and talk to people if they're going to make any substantial income in this business. Why do you think that is so difficult for the vast majority of people that call themselves real estate agents?
I think it's difficult for them because of the agenda that they've bought into, that, they don't realize it's only a step up from used car sales. So they're treated the same way, but they think they're treated lavishly. And I think they just don't want to get down and don't want to do the hard work to it. I think it's very convenient to just post a reel and sit there and say, hey, this is great. Let the leads flow in.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. So just taking the path of least resistance and then sit back and live in what we call hopium, right? Hope that it's going to work out. All right, so let's break down your business. So you do $30 million this year. First off, let's talk about lead generation. What lead sources primarily are you working right now?
It's like 95% canceled expires.
Got it. Okay. So you're working the lowest hanging fruit, but at the same time, you're working lead sources that are the most difficult to convert because the amount of competition, right? And so let's talk about how you're able to convert these types of leads, because everybody has heard of, okay, I want to go after canceled, expired, or withdrawns. And a lot of people try. And it's very rare, Mark, that people actually have success going after that source of business, although they understand that it's probably the quickest way to get a listing. They try it. They do it, Mark. I have agents tell me every day, I'm doing it. First off, I can't get anybody to pick up the phone. When I do, I can't get past resistance, et cetera, et cetera. So what are you doing? What is your approach to contacting these people first? Are you calling them? Do you door knock them? Do you put up the bat signal in the sky and hope that they call you? Like, how do you actually talk to these people?
Yeah, the biggest thing for me is I don't really door knock to them. I mean, I'll door knock and hand deliver a resume in the sense of if I feel like there's a good opportunity for me not to waste my time. But the biggest thing for me was just the phone. I mean, it's if I have that good first conversation, I'll put them in the pile of, hey, maybe I can give them a follow-up call. Back in the day, before I realized of how to disqualify a prospect, I would just call out of the blue and say, shit, let's hope they don't cuss me out and block my number the second time I'm calling them, because I felt like they would remember me a week later. They don't remember me. It's always been on the phone, and I try to have a unique conversation where, you can disqualify the prospect and they can remember the conversation and say, hey, I remember you. I think I had a good call about you. And we talked about what went wrong in the sale of my home. Everyone else just wanted to put up a sign in the yard.
Yeah. And we're going to talk about that in a second. One of the biggest challenges for agents that are calling expireds, canceled, withdrawn, that type of business, and you hear it all the time inside of our community, is, well, no one picks up the phone. My contact rate is so low. So Mark, how have you gotten past that? Because how many people do you talk to? How much prospecting are you doing per day? Let's start with that.
I freaking love prospecting. My schedule, 90% of my schedule, Brandon, I'll be completely honest, is just prospecting. I used to try to buy people lunch. I used to try to show as many houses as I could, or try to at least meet people on their job sites, let's say contractors or something. It just never worked for me until I sat down and I would call from 8 a.m. to like sometimes 8 to 3 p.m., 4 p.m. is a daily. That's non-negotiable. That's just because I clear my schedule to call. I've put systems in place where I don't have to be outside of my office. I can just be on the phones. But I've probably done 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. and then I leave the office to go do whatever I need to do for the last 3 years consistently.
And that's just the thing. I hope everyone heard. You're prospecting from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. in the afternoon every day, 5 days a week?
5 days a week. Yep. I just started doing weekends.
For the past 3 years consistently. You see, most agents, Mark, they don't prospect that much in a month, let alone in a day. And because you've understood that you're either on an appointment presenting or you're on the phone looking for an appointment. These are the only two things that pay really well. Everything outside of that is a waste of time. And your results this year has manifested over what you've done over the past 3 years, in that you're going to generate $600,000 in income doing this thing that most agents are avoiding like the plague. Talk to us about the importance of the consistency, the compound effect, and the accumulation of all your prospecting. Because most people say, well, Mark, that's bullshit, dude. I prospect, I called for a couple hours here and there, and I didn't get any leads. I didn't get any appointments. talk to us about the importance of consistency, and then we'll break down some tactical things.
Consistency is key in everything. I'm really big on personal development, so that same aspect of personal development just bled into my business. But for me, with consistency, I have two really two big testimonies I could share. Is one, I had called a developer who came off the market with some like 2-unit build here in the area, and I was like, hey, we had a great call. He didn't pick up the phone for 6 months after that. I was supposed to meet him later that week too. He just ghosted me. And I eventually called him back 6 months later after, multiple attempts. And he's like, hey, I have a new project. Why don't you just show up and take a look at it? And I was like, okay, well, what's this? That landed me a 12-unit development that he just handed to me. And he was just like, hey, I want you to list this. And he never gave me a why, never gave me anything else. Another really big consistent factor to it is I had a client who I sold, I had represented a client to sell a property to a builder too. And I ended up really wanting to work with that builder who was represented by another agent, but he would just always ghost me. And he had a lot of agents wanting to give him a call. I eventually became really persistent to him, and he used me to write some pretty substantial off-market offers, one that we're pending on right now for about 12 million. That's off-market. And he was like, I only chose you because you're well-spoken and you kept freaking calling me, period.
Yeah.
That's it. You just kept calling me.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, is there any tactical thing that you can share with the audience to help them increase their contact rate? Because once we get to the Q&A section of this conversation, people are already starting to ask, like, well, I call and I can't get anybody on the phone. That's like the number one, I don't know if I'll call it an excuse because people are putting in the reps, but they can't get the results. So what have you done to increase contact rate with that source of business?
Number one is always try to be the first to the phone, but that was something I picked up from Tucker, and that was only the last couple of months. I honestly would say to pick up your contact rate, the best thing that I can do is you just have to really get a hold of more people. Some people don't want to call in the morning. Jeb Blunt talks about it. You always have to call in the morning. It's when they're least irritated at you. But really just calling from, I wouldn't say I've ever really discovered the magic sauce to it, Brandon. It's just been, if I can talk to the next person in line, sometimes the most random people pick up the phone who have ignored me for months, and I have a conversation with them for an hour. So that's just been, for me, the more contacts.
Well, what's interesting about that, Mark, is that most people were looking for, and I didn't know what you were going to say, right? This isn't scripted. You and I talked for 5 minutes before I went live. Yeah. But what they were hoping you were going to say was that you were going to have all these secrets, these nuggets. Okay, you're going to do this. You're going to whitelist your number, then put your number here, and then do this, that, the other thing. And then you're going to show. You didn't say any of that. All you said was, well, I don't do anything, Brandon. All I do is make the calls, and I get results because I'm just putting in the work. Like, you're not doing, there's no secret sauce that Mark Poppich knows that nobody else knows that you're not sharing with everybody. Is that fair?
It's 1,000% fair.
Yeah, like you don't have this key thing that like you're the expired man, you're going to make 600. He knows something that I just don't know, and that MFer is just not telling us. I know it. I mean, that's what they're thinking, but that's not the case at all. You just simply have a list of expireds like everybody else does in every other market, and you just simply make phone calls for 6 hours a day. I mean, there is no other secret around that. Now we're going to talk about the skills and the thing and how to handle the conversation in just a second, but from a pure effort perspective, you're just putting in the reps. Would you agree?
That's it. There's nothing else to it.
Yeah, nothing else to it. I love it how matter of fact you are about it. It's so good. So let's talk about the actual conversation itself. This is where I think it matters a lot, right? So what have you learned in how to handle these conversations such that A, you're able to get past initial resistance, and B, you're able to actually have a productive conversation? Because to your point, most people that prospect expired, cancel, withdrawn say, dude, I can't even get it. I can't even get a word in. These people are so upset, let alone ask the first question in the script. So teach us, what have you learned to handle these conversations?
I think, Alex Hormozy always says 10,000 cold calls will teach you more about sales than a sales book ever will. I mean, the moment I pick up the phone, I can sense someone's like emotional stability on the phone, when they're pissed off, they're open to the conversation. It's pretty quick. I mean, you can quickly understand it. For me, it's just been, just trying to pivot from the conversation. Sometimes I'll jump in and say, hey, look, you'll hate me. Can I have 30 seconds of your time? Sometimes I'll just flat out go. If I see the door, I'll just start asking the questions. There's some people where I don't have to repeat the script every single time. But really, I think it's just understanding the person's, emotional or tone of voice. That's been the biggest key for me, is I can sense their pain point just right off the bat when they pick up the phone.
So what you're saying, right, from a coach's perspective, someone who's been selling over the phone for 20 years, what you said was the key to having productive conversations isn't what you say. It's what you hear that determines what you say. You see, everybody else has that wrong, right? So when they come to me for help, Mark, well, what's the script? What's the script? What's the script? What's the script? You know the scripts, right? You know what to say, but that isn't the secret. The secret is what you just said, which is I'm listening for who I'm actually speaking to. That will then determine what it is that I say. And so you're not listening with the intent of, because what most people do is they've got their finger literally on the script, and they don't hear anything that the prospect says. They just have their finger on this script. I'm telling you, this is what it's like. I shadow them. They go like this. So they got the script in their hand. If this was a piece of paper, this will be good for the audience. So you could see my iPad. They're like this. As soon as they hear like a dead noise, and then they just read the next line of the script. They don't even hear what the person said. They're just going down one. You see, the secret to having productive conversations is first understanding and knowing what to say. I mean, can you and I agree on that? Because what the audience is hearing is like, yeah, Mark's been doing this a lot longer than me. What if I'm just getting started? Like, I don't have the confidence. First, understanding how you're going to approach the conversation from a script perspective, I think you would say that's fairly important. But then once you get past that, really trying to listen will determine whether or not you can have a productive conversation. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, you said the words I couldn't even come up with, but that's exactly what I would have said if I would have known what to say.
Yeah. So, which is all fine and dandy, but like your skill level is a result of your own emotional intelligence. In other words, people can see it right now, just in this interview, that you're pretty comfortable with, I don't know, call it maybe being uncomfortable, in that because you could stay calm, you could stay cool under fire. Like, somebody can be upset with you and you could still not respond emotionally and get in this argument and be able to probably respond to some resistance and some objections and stay on the phone longer than most people that don't have that emotional intelligence. Would that be fair?
Yeah, not always, but yeah, I would say so.
All right. So talk to us about that. Talk to us about, okay, the key thing is you've got to, for the most part, set appointments with people, right?
Yeah.
And so how are you taking this conversation from, are there any techniques that you've learned through the work that we've done together that helps you actually set and go on more appointments?
100%. I think it's always been in a position where every time I used to go on the calls, they'd be like, you got a buyer for me? Well, no, I don't. Well, then why the hell are you calling me? Taking that was one of the biggest things I could not figure out how to get to that. But they're not asking you if you actually have a buyer. They don't care about that.
That's right.
What they're asking you for is they're asking you something completely different. And the goal is to get past that. For me, with the scripts and really just understanding the way you would break down calls, more than the scripts actually, as a matter of fact, no offense, but would be understanding, okay, well, shoot, the script says this, but Brandon broke down the prospect's tone of voice and questions to the agent in a way where it makes me question my approach to it completely differently.
That's right. That's exactly right. And so if we're looking at like from a conversion standpoint, right? So one of the things I said, hey, Mark, bring your conversions. Can you walk us through what your prospecting conversions look like? In other words, what are your contacts per hour? What are your contacts to lead and then lead to appointment set? I'm really, really curious on like how you're converting over the phone, which will tell the story.
Yeah. Honestly, my contacts per hour, I would say if I could get that to be, over 10 contacts an hour, I honestly think I could have doubled my business to 50, 60 million. I just don't get that kind of rate. I barely walk away with 20 to 15 contacts. Sometimes I don't even call it a contact.
Right.
If they hang up on me pretty quickly and I consider it a shitty call, I don't want to call it, consider it a contact. But in 2024, I've had about a 20% conversion. I had 167 leads. And those are leads that I consider reverse selling qualified leads. Someone who knows who I am when I call them. More importantly, someone who I've at least agreed to have a call with, a follow-up call with, a Zoom call or an appointment, or I can hand deliver my resume. And they were openly willing to say, hey, we actually really want to see your resume. We won't throw it away.
So 167 is what you generated over that course of a year. And when you say 20% conversion, you're talking about of those 167 that you generated over the phone, 20% you were able to convert into an appointment met or into a listing taken or into a sale.
Sale, contract written, buyer brokerage agreement service signed, listing agreement signed, 2025 coming, etc. Yeah.
It's amazing. So talk to us about like that next step in an agent's sales process. So appointment set to appointment met, there's a whole bunch of stuff that can go wrong, right? And oftentimes it does go wrong. I think there's a lot of agents who say, well, Mark, I'm getting pretty good at getting people to verbalize this agreement around meeting with me, but then I can never get them to show up for the meeting. Either they're canceling on me or I show up and they no-show me, et cetera, et cetera. Is there anything that you can share that's helped you increase the number of people that you actually set appointments with that actually come to fruition?
Yeah. I heard a call recording last week from Jacob Scott. I think it was on September 13th of 2024. I would recommend everyone go back and listen to that call because that call taught me a lot. It's what I used to do back in the day. It's when the prospect just has you on the phone and they're just saying, yeah. And you're like, oh, can I send you my resume? And they're like, okay, sounds good. Bye-bye. And you just say bye. But I think understanding that aspect of it is when I can speak with the prospect, where am I pivoting to from there?
So in other words, you're talking about like this technique we talk about all the time, which is disqualification, right? Versus what we would say forcing leads or having happy ears, right? Yeah. So can you explain the difference between those two so the audience can say, okay, I kind of get what Mark's talking about here. Can you talk to us about the difference of that, of like all the agents that force any Tom, Dick, and Harry into their world, right? Versus the technique of disqualifying so that quality goes up.
Yeah. I think it comes down, I'm someone who when I show up and I can sense the intensity between the seller or the buyer or whoever I'm working with. If it's an awkward interaction, if I'm knocking on their door, showing up to an appointment, you force that lead. For some reason, people are willing to invite you to their house and they do not want to know who the hell you are. It doesn't make any sense to me, but I've had that before. And I think that if I'm showing up to the door and I'm confident, I'm like, this is going to be great. Like, hey, how are you? Brandon, good to see you. I had a great call. And you're like, oh, welcome in, come inside my house. My kids are upstairs. You're a stranger, but I trust you based off our phone call. I think just understanding that, because I've had people who have not shown up to appointments and I drove 2 hours to listing appointment and no one opened the door. And I drove home feeling like a clown.
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt. Are you doing anything from a tactic perspective of like, okay, I set this appointment on, let's just say Thursday afternoon, today's Tuesday, or do you just hang up the phone and then hope they show up, or do you do anything in between there?
No, I always try to at least have another conversation with them. Some people prefer different strategies, approaches to it, but if I don't have another conversation to them, if they don't respond, I just won't show up. Even if they don't respond and they show up, that's their fault, because I gave them multiple warnings of like, hey, I'm only showing up if I can actually communicate with you. I'm not going to show up if I'm not getting any communication back. Whether it's a simple text of saying, hey, I look forward to seeing you later today, being courteous and professional, I consider it. If they're not responding, I don't show up either.
Got it. So the second piece of communication when you set an appointment is simply just to confirm the time of the appointment. Is that right? Is there anything else that you're doing or saying?
Yeah, I mean, in the process, for example, it's like I hang up the phone and they've either said, hey, we want to click your resume or we don't. I'll either mail it to them, I'll email it to them. They'll usually follow up and say, hey, we got it. If they don't get it, I have the tracking number. I just want to see if they got the resume, if they had any questions for it. I always do try to ask hey, can we have a call before I meet you on this day? And then if I never had the opportunity of getting the question of the upfront close on the first call, I'll try to do it in the second call, say, hey, I have an agreement. If we break it down together and you feel like, hey, I think Mark's the right agent for me, is there anything that would not allow you to move forward on Thursday at 1 p.m. with me as your agent? Yeah, we have to wait till March because my mom-in-law still lives here and she's moving out. Okay, that makes sense. Well, I'll leave it with you. I'll just make them feel comfortable about it.
Love it. So good. It's great. So now let's shift gears and talk about the actual appointment itself. So we talked about prospecting. We talked about what lead sources you are working. We talked about where you're getting your leads from, et cetera. We talked about all that. Actually, before the listing appointment, just quickly, I don't even know how good or not good you are at this. Talk to us about how lead follow-up has played a role in your business personally. Some agents are great at it. Some agents are not. What I tend to find, which I'm going to find out right now, is that most agents that go after expire, cancel, withdrawn aren't very good at lead follow-up. They're such good salespeople that most of their business comes from that first contact to appointment set, that they don't really actually have a pipeline. But how has that played a role in your business?
Follow-up is everything for me in expires and cancels. I have a Google sheet. It's about 10 rows. I mean, starting from the name to the type of lead that I got to the day that I called them, the day I sent you a thank you card, the notes, the MLS number. So anytime I'm calling through them, I usually have a day that's in my opinion, in my calendar, it's blocked out for Wednesdays. You consider it calling hot and cold leads. If I'm calling them, then, we had a conversation that I can pick up on. But if I'm reviewing my follow-up calls and I say, this is not a follow-up worthy call just yet, I'm going to push it. I'm not going to prematurely call the lead, because that could just diffuse any potential I had to light something up,
Yeah, I love it. And if you had to guess, I don't know if you know this number, but what percentage of the listing appointments you actually go on come from lead follow-up versus that first initial phone call? If you had to guess.
If I do 10 in the last month, I would probably say 7 or 6 are lead follow-up.
It's huge. It's massive. I mean, that's really, really good. And that's where I think a lot of agents that prospect this type of business are falling short. That's probably a whole other episode in it by itself, because 60 to 70% of your total income comes out of lead follow-up. Like, that's how important this thing is. And so a lot of agents, they get stuck in what I call first contact-itis, which they're super good at making the initial call, and whatever they get from that initial conversation, whatever leads they get, whatever appointments they get from that first call is what they get, because from there, things kind of just fall apart. So lead follow-up for you has been literally almost the biggest substantial piece of your entire business. Is that true?
100%. And if I can say something, Brandon, is that okay?
Yeah, please.
So the reason I've say 6 to 7 is because I feel like that's a very conservative number, but it's also, in my opinion, when I say that, it hurts me because I feel like it's not enough.
Yeah.
For example, I'm trying to buy a new car, and if I show up to a car dealership, I'm always just driving by them and I stop in and see what they have. No one effing follows up with me.
That's right.
It actually irritates me. I'm giving you my number. I'll give you what I want. Can you just please give me a call? I tell my wife all the time. I go to the dealership. We sit down. We talk about pricing. Here's what you can do. There's this. I'm like, okay, this is great. This is the car I want. I'll call you back next week. I need to think about it with my wife. They don't follow up. And I'm like, I really want the car, but I'm not going to buy it because I feel a disservice with you not following up. I just genuinely won't buy the car. So I can only imagine what they're like when you're selling a $2 or $3 or $1 million home. They're like, hey, give a crap and call me back.
You're so right. And that is why most agents fall short of their financial goals, is because of their misunderstanding of lead follow-up. You see, lead follow-up is the only evidence that a prospect has to how it's going to be when they do business with you. And so for most people that have a lack of follow-up, there is no reason, there's no compelling reason as to why, to your point, the prospect should engage with you. And therefore, what I'm saying is, Mark, most agents are like, oh, I don't want to be annoying. I don't want to just be the follow-up guy. And they have this lack of lead follow-up and they have no business.
Yeah.
Versus the other people who follow up all the time are the ones with all the business. And so you've probably dealt with that too. It's like, I don't know. I don't know what to say. It's like, just follow up. Following up too much can never hurt. Following up too little can absolutely crush your business. Right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's key words to it, Baron. It's sales 101. I'm hoping everyone here knows not to use the word follow up or circle back. I mean, that's just pretty simple stuff. But
that's right.
You always want to have an interesting conversation. I'll always call them. If I'm calling them once or twice a month, it's a neighborhood update. It's a market update. And it's something that's saying, hey, I don't know who you're interviewing right now, but I just had an open house a mile away from you. I had 20 freaking people at my house. And I know for a fact 15 of them would be interested in your house. And that stuff like that has won me listing agreements. They're like, hey, we know you're in the market and no other agent gave us this information. We really want to work with you.
Love it. All right. Now let's transfer over to the listing presentation. So this is probably the most important part of a listing agent's business, the ability to have a compelling presentation, or the lack of. So there's so much when it comes to the listing presentation. We don't have time to go through that whole thing. However, is there maybe 1, 2, or 3 parts of your listing presentation that you've learned that really, really make the difference as to having somebody hire you or not hire you?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest factors for me was learning and asking them up front, saying, "Hey, can I be honest? Like, I fully agree. I give you the permission to fire me if you want," and setting that framework with them up front of saying, "Hey, I'm here as someone who's trying to be an employee to you as the employer," and that concept to them just immediately gives them comfort. I'm here to just guide you through the process. This is what I have, and this is where I'm at. Also, my close on site ratio, Brandon, is really not that high. I don't force my clients to sign any agreements with me. Sometimes I wish I should have or I could have, but in my experience, if I'm reading the seller, they really don't want to sign that agreement right there and then. And I feel like if I make them sign it, they're just going to call me, and because I have that no handcuff clause, hey, sorry, next week we decided not to sell our house, and then see it on the market. So I just feel like just being completely comfortable with the client and allowing them to really just take control of the conversation, in the sense of, if they're talking, I'll just let them talk. I don't need to run my script or run my strategy approach behind it, because half the time I show up, like I did on last Thursday, the first word I walked into the house, like, "How are you going to stage my house?" And I'm like, I had like 18 minutes before I got to the staging aspect of it, but I guess we can jump right in. And the whole script went out the door. Typically, I would have broke down a year ago, but if I could just take that on and then slowly weave them back in, that was the biggest thing for me.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I think that it's so important as to how you set up these conversations that will determine how the conversation goes, where most people aren't setting any type of an agenda. They don't have any, upfront foreshadow or agreements, and the presentation goes all over the place. And so I love that fact. What about like navigating the conversation with sellers around the price of their home? Again, some agents get good at prospecting. They get good at setting appointments. They get good at going on appointments. They even get good at getting people to sign contracts. And you know what? They can't sell anything. All their listings expire because they buy the listing. And by buying the listing, I know you know what that means. They just go in and tell sellers whatever they want to hear, whatever price they tell them. They take it at whatever commission they can get, knowing that the home is not going to sell. So how are you actually not only able to take the listing, but ensure that when you take a listing, we call it saleable. In other words, when you take a listing, you have a philosophy that thing's going to get sold. How are you navigating that conversation with sellers?
I've only had one listing that never sold after I took it.
Amazing.
The other one that I considered technically one that actually didn't sell was they paid for the photos, they paid for everything, and they were like, "Hey, we want to list it at this price." And I was like, "You're way over above it," but I invested zero time into it, and I was okay with doing that. I felt they were okay with that. We made an agreement. I was like, "Okay, I won't waste my time at an overpriced listing." But in my opinion, I'm not scared to talk about the price. It's not. I mean, I'm there as an advisor. I always put on the framework. I built my career on wanting to prospect. And I say I built my career on wanting to be a serious advisor, not someone who posts reels. That's why I've avoided social media. I like a plague until the time is right, in my opinion. But I talk about it. I talk about the things they don't want to talk about. I tell them, "Hey, I'm not the cheapest agent for you, but here's the services I provide." And if I tell them up front, "Hey, this home across the street is better than yours and it's sold for a lower price than what you're thinking," I can't get your home sold. And I don't think I'm the right agent for you if you're going to fight me on that, because the data here is real and I can show you this house if you want to see it.
It's amazing. I mean, we call that disarming honesty. And how did you get that type of confidence and courage through failure? In other words, it took me a little while to get there. I didn't have it right when I first started 20 years ago. The reason that got me there was from all the time that I failed over and over and over and over again. I always tell the story. My story is a little different than yours. My first 20 listings all failed to sell. Every single one. Why? Because I was so good at sales, but I was not the expert advisor that you're talking about. I could take listings left and right. I could just take them. But they all failed to sell. It took me a lot of that failure to get to the point where I know where the landmines are, and I know that I have to actually do what most agents can't do, which is to shoot the seller absolutely straight. Otherwise, it's going to backfire on me. Yep. And so it sounded like you just got there right from the start, or did you have to get there through some growing pains?
I got there through some shitty clients, just
exactly
people who have made my life hell. And it was only 2 or 3 times, but it was so bad I still don't like thinking about it to this day. And I don't go to those appointments if I even sense that on the phone.
And that's exactly right. And that's the difference between a top producer such as yourself and everybody else. For everybody that missed that, let me explain what you just said. I'll put it in these terms. You do so much prospecting, Mark, that you actually have a choice on who you get to work with versus all the agents who never prospect, who just take the crumbs that you leave for them. You see, the agents are taking, they're working in the wake of agents like you, meaning you do so much prospecting, you get the best clients. And the agents that don't do any prospecting, they don't have any choice. They have to take what they get. So they end up with the shittiest clients, with the most worst listings at the worst price, with the most unmotivated seller, the clients from hell, because that's all they can get, because the top producers like you have said no. And so we always talk about, like, if you prospect a lot, it gives you choices. And I think that's what you're talking about. Is that right?
That's 100% right. I mean, I couldn't have said it better, honestly, Brian.
You live from a world of abundance because you have so many choices, because you talk to so many people. And so you have this, it's not a fake mindset of abundance. We talk about have the mindset of abundance. Well, you can only fake that for so long until you're like, dude, I'm desperate, man. I'm going broke. I need the actual money. No, you see, you actually live abundance because you have an abundance type of action plan. You do so much prospecting that it's easy for you to say no to a prospect that isn't super motivated. It's easy for you to say no to a listing at an appointment where the seller just isn't super, super motivated, because you're not worried about getting more appointments. Is that right?
That's 100% right. I mean, I consider it in the way, sometimes if I'm at an appointment, I'll say, well, I enjoy giving this person a Tuesday update call. Is it going to suck? Am I going to say, hey, I don't know what's going on with your house, I can't do anything to sell it, and they're going to cuss me out? Because I genuinely want to enjoy calling my client. I would genuinely want to enjoy inviting you to my holiday party. I don't want to block you from my phone and never talk to you ever again. Or even I'm scared of you coming after me, like with bad reviews and stuff like that.
That's right.
It's not worth it for me to have that headache. It's just not worth it.
And again, just to be really clear on this point, and then we're going to open this up for Q&A, you guys, the only way you can actually get there for real is because of the amount of prospecting you're doing. So what I mean by that, Mark, and I want you to speak on this last point, and then you guys can throw your questions down below and I'll grab them. If you are only going on one listing appointment per month, that would be tough to behave that way. Versus when you set a plethora of appointments and then you get to choose which ones you want to actually go on, you're able to approach that from an abundance mindset. Does that make sense?
That's 100% right.
So that's the key takeaway for everybody that's listening to this live or maybe on the replay. I get it. I understand that if you've only gone on 2 listing appointments this whole year, I mean, the fact of the matter, Mark, is, I don't know if you know this, 50% of all licensees have yet to sell one house in 2024.
Yeah.
50%. So if you've only gone on one appointment, of course you reek of commission breath. Of course you reek of desperation. Of course you're going to take the listing at whatever price you can get it at, under whatever terms you can take it at. That's why these agents behave that way. And so if we don't want to behave that way in 2025, we have to actually have an abundance type activity plan where we do a lot of activity so that we can be more picky and choosy. Okay. All right. So last thing, and then you guys, again, throw your questions in the comments. And if there aren't any questions, Mark, we can let you off early. But can you walk us through what you do when you take a listing? Are there things that you do to bring the property to the open market such that you put its best foot forward to make sure you get it sold?
Brandon, I didn't catch that. Could you say it again?
Yeah. So after you take the listing, someone signs a contract.
Yeah.
What are some things that you do to service your listing to make sure that that client has an awesome experience?
Really, I have a high level of standards in everything that I do. So for me, like I drove an hour last week to go to the house and to set it up as we went live, to go patch drywall and touch up some paint.
Sure.
Because I couldn't get a handyman out there on a short notice. I couldn't do this, I couldn't do that. I wasn't going to let the house be shown with something like that. So I think it's just from the follow-up to the emails that I'm sending them to the CMAs that I'm providing to them if they have a new competitor on the market. It's just, I want to see, like, okay, am I happy with the product? Okay, I'm happy with it. But if they're not happy with it, then it's not on my end, unless it is and we're just completely unparalleled. It's just always trying to give them the best service that I'm happy with.
Yeah, I love it. And I think you do something that I obsess about, which the way that I know if it's when you talk about the product, you're talking about the service in which you deliver. The way that I look at that, I don't know if you look at this the same way or differently, is I'm constantly studying my competition all the time, day and night. And so are you spending time looking at all the other actives that you're competing with?
I'm always doing that, but I'm always looking at what the number one agent in my market is doing. And some of the stuff just blows me away. Like I have albums. If I go on my phone, I'll just scroll with screenshots of stuff that I don't have implemented that they would kick my ass on in a listing appointment. And for me, that was enough for me to say, okay, these are the things I need to start adding. And the more and more I implement, to be honest, that's the more and more I get my confidence from. Because if someone is doing 200, 300 million a year is doing this, and I'm doing this at 30, I'm going the right way.
Like what? Would you give, like, what are some examples?
I think even the level of marketing that they use, they don't cheap out. I mean, I'm showing up to a listing appointment. They're expecting, I'm telling them, hey, I'm spending $3,000 to $4,000 on marketing your house without the certainty of it selling. Not for me to just quickly sell it in a week and spend $500 on marketing. I actually want to make my own financial investment into you as a client to sell your home in the best possible way. I actually want you to stand out. I don't want another shitty photographer at your house like the last time.
That's great. Absolutely. Like actually putting forth something, the tangible value to put a great product out there. And that shows up in the work that you do. It's amazing. All right. So just a couple of questions here. There's actually not a ton this week, believe it or not.